Declaring yourself to be a champion of user privacy is one thing, but protecting it for real is a whole different story, especially when something doesn't go as planned. Whenever an actual vulnerability is discovered, the company's reaction speaks louder than any marketing slogans. Today, I'll show you how Apple protects the privacy of the very people who helped it build the massive services business, and what Apple does when things go wrong. I'm talking about you, developers, and specifically the indie app publishers whom Apple loves to praise. Long story short, 2 months ago I discovered a mechanism that leaked hidden IDs of Apple accounts. It affected about a quarter of all publishers enrolled as individuals. And get this, it was made possible by Apple's official, entirely authorized tools, Apple Media Services and Apple ID data archives. But what's truly disturbing is the number of people who could potentially access the exposed info. It is practically anyone with an Apple ID, in other words, billions. If you're interested in the technical details, you can find them on my blog at the link below. I will give you a quick overview in this video, but its main focus would be on what happened after I reported the problem, which by the way happened the very next day after I discovered it. I'm afraid Apple's conduct paints an even grimmer picture than the vulnerability itself. And that is why I decided to disclose it publicly 60 days after the report. My name is Yakov, and you're watching The Code Bird. I normally make videos about hands-on software engineering, but today's topic seems important enough to go beyond the usual format. Here's a really brief overview of the vulnerability I found. Once again, if you want the full picture, go read the link post. Let's say you're an indie developer. Given this channel topic, you very well may be. Then, with only 3 steps, your sensitive information can end up in the wrong hands. And so can the information of millions to tens of millions of others. Step 1. You enroll in Apple's developer program as an individual. When you then sign into App Store Connect, there's a roughly 1 in 4 chance that in the account picker you'll see not just your name, but also a string of digits. Step 2. Someone downloads your app. Doesn't matter if it's free or paid and what platform it's developed for. Step 3. That person downloads their own purchase history. Congrats! Your account's sensitive info just got exposed. And as you can see through entirely authorized tools. No hacks, no breaches, no abuse. Any Apple ID user can do this, which means the pool of potential bad actors is literally billions of people. Those digits from step 1 is nothing less than your personal Apple ID number, internally known as DSID. You can think of it as the serial number of your account. 3 things to know about it. It is unique, meaning it identifies your specific account among all others. It is permanent, meaning you can never change it, unless you're willing to ditch your Apple ID and start a new one from scratch. And it is hidden from everyone, including you, for a very good reason. The Apple ID number links together everything you do across Apple's huge ecosystem. Your signed-in devices, your clicks in Apple's newsletters, your App Store, Apple TV, and whatever browsing history. And even the exact moments you start and stop playing music. They're all tied to your account through this Apple ID number. What happens if someone learns it? I identified 3 key threats. The good news, perhaps the only good news, is that having this number alone doesn't let anyone sign into your account and get any other data directly. However, they can track your activity if this number surfaced any other way, through traffic sniffing or through any past or future data breaches. They can also determine roughly how long you've been in the Apple ecosystem, and that would make your digital dossier even more detailed. That's because these numbers are widely believed to increment in sequence. Lower numbers correspond to older accounts and higher numbers to newer ones. But 2 more threats make this vulnerability unique and much worse. One of them is caused by the fact that your Apple ID number didn't leak just by itself. It's right next to your full name. And as you know, App Store Connect requires that you use your real legal name. You also know that App Store Connect accounts have lots of other personal data, such as bank details, tax forms, and physical addresses. Bad actors know this too. Now imagine the degree of credibility a phishing email like this would have. The developer is certain that this number is not known to anyone outside Apple. And finally, because of how this vulnerability works, remember those 3 easy steps. It enables on-demand, highly targeted attacks. If someone wants to get your Apple ID number, all they have to do is download your app, then open their own purchase history. It's as if you bought a book and the bookstore printed the author's social security number on the receipt. Again, if you want the full explanation, including how I arrived at the millions to tens of millions of impacted users, you can find it at the link below. What do you think so far? Doesn't look good, right? But trust me, when you learn how Apple responded, you'll start worrying about much more than this. The timeline that led to this moment is perhaps the most concerning part of my report. I didn't like it, you won't like it, and I doubt even Apple liked it. Yet those are facts, so they shouldn't be kept secret, unlike the Apple ID numbers. For me personally, the chain of events started back in March 2018. At that time, I was learning iOS app development, and that's when I created an App Store Connect account to publish a pet project. Immediately, AMS used my personal Apple ID number as part of the internal account label, though back then I didn't even realize what this number was. In May 2018, Apple launched the Data and Privacy Portal. Designed to offer greater transparency, this very tool would later compromise the privacy of others. Ironic, huh? However, at that point, data archives didn't include purchase history at all, so there was nothing wrong with them. By the way, those data archives is one of the very few places to find your own Apple ID number. A few months later, I decided I didn't like those digits in my account label. I didn't have any specific concerns about them, but they just didn't look good. So in February 2019, I reached out to developer support to change the label. Apple said this wasn't possible, but it assured me that the label would remain internal. This proves that by the time Apple knew about the label format, but didn't grasp its potential implications. Fast forward 5 years. Last September, I requested a data archive for my own Apple ID. I do so from time to time with all services I use, just to back up the data. Crucially, data archives still didn't include purchase history at that point, and that allows us to more accurately pinpoint the vulnerability's timeframe. As of last year, it was not exploitable yet. Later that year, I set up another publisher account, this time for Podcast Connect. Apple Media Services again used my personal Apple ID number in the account's internal label. March 2025 seems to be the turning point. That is when Apple published a white paper outlining the data schema for what looked like a new file in data archives. According to the document, the file named Store Transaction Purchase and Free Apps History contains a detailed history of the user's purchases and free apps that the user downloaded. Of course, the white paper didn't mention that the seller column in the spreadsheet would expose sensitive data, but that didn't really matter. All the mistakes, oversight, and negligence had already aligned perfectly to enable this vulnerability. I consider March 2025 to be the time when it became active and exploitable. However, I discovered it only 4 months later, and entirely by accident. I don't know if anyone else had found it before me, and if they had, what they did with it. As for me, I wanted to back up my data once again, and that is why I requested an Apple ID archive. A few days later, the archive was ready for download. And that is when I made the unsettling discovery. Apple ID numbers were listed in the several columns for anyone to see, or more than just see. I found my own number, and I found the numbers of a bunch of other developers. All affected records look like they belong to individual publishers, not corporate accounts. I analyzed my own transaction records, and I asked a few people to share their purchases with me. I found that the chance of being impacted is about 25% among individual publishers, and it doesn't matter when the account was created. The very next day, I reported this finding through Apple's security bounty program. And at first, I was really delighted to see a swift and professional response. Apple requested a proof of concept video, and I sent it the following day. In this video, I demonstrated how I download my archive from the privacy portal, open the affected file, and highlight the exposed numbers. Again, this interaction looked promising. At least my report was taken seriously. However, this is when things started to turn sour. I got no response to the video whatsoever, and could only guess if my files were even received. A few days later, I did get a response, just not in the way I expected. A few more archives I'd requested to validate my prior findings finished processing, but they contained no AMS data at all. The emails I got simply stated that the data was currently unavailable. It looked like a quiet fix, but with no follow-up on the security ticket, I can only speculate. Everything I knew about security research said this wasn't a prime example of productive collaboration. But as long as I saw at least some positive change, I could tolerate that poor communication. A few days went by, and on July 17th, I got another data archive requested 2 weeks earlier. This archive again disclosed Apple ID numbers in the purchase history. I double-checked the data and posted a follow-up on the ticket. On July 18th, Apple changed the security report status to reproduced. That means at this point, Apple knew that the issue was real, knew how to trigger it, and perhaps even knew how it could be exploited if left unpatched. This change of status looked like a good sign to me, even though I hadn't received any message since the POC request. And from here, things only went from bad to worse. On the last day of July, I finished reviewing another batch of data archives, and I realized that all of them were impacted by the very same vulnerability. I reported this in a new follow-up, but this time I asked two direct questions. When can I expect a real response to my previous communication? And when will the actual vulnerability be resolved? In response, I got a message as generic as you can imagine. Here it is.
We are still investigating this issue. To avoid placing our customers at risk, we would appreciate you not disclosing this information until our investigation is complete. We appreciate your assistance in helping us to maintain and improve the security of our products.
I have no way to prove it, but I'm pretty sure this response was written by a PR person and not someone who actually deals with bug reports. And I can't imagine when using language like this could be a good idea, especially when we're talking about security. I obviously wasn't satisfied with this answer, or rather a non-answer. So I sent another message, reiterating the question about the expected resolution. And here's what I got in response.
I'm sorry,
No, not.
but we can't provide any estimated timelines at the moment. However, we're actively investigating the matter.
It was extremely telling. At that point, it became crystal clear to me that Apple was not, or never even had been acting in good faith. Apple was willing to stonewall me and jeopardize the user's security, just to avoid public disclosure and save its face. So, as I received that last response and cringed over it, my research became totally independent. I continued requesting, collecting, and analyzing new archives, but I no longer saw any point in trying to collaborate with Apple. Moreover, any notion of coordinated disclosure became irrelevant, because it only makes sense when there is at least some degree of good faith collaboration. I continued monitoring the situation, and a few days later I received yet another data archive, this one requested a week earlier. In this archive, I did find the data for Apple Media Services once again. However, this data used the older schema, similar to that found in my last year's archive. It seemed that Apple had rolled the system back to its previous state. Critically, it had done so silently, without ever acknowledging this to me or the public. But ironically, you could still find the white paper from March 2025 on the site, which now became misleading. On August 12th, another data archive became ready for download. And guess what? It contained purchase history again, and that purchase history exposed the Apple ID numbers just as before. It's as if nothing's changed in the month and a half. The vulnerability was back in full effect. I couldn't believe my eyes. But what wasn't so unbelievable is of course the absence of any updates on the security ticket. In similar fashion, no updates followed a week later, when two more data requests finished with AMS data again becoming currently unavailable. After that, I continued monitoring the systems, but my focus shifted on writing up this report. Just in case, I'm leaving a few seconds here so I can add any important updates in post. But frankly, I don't believe that would even matter. At this point, I don't even know if Apple intends to ever disclose this vulnerability. I'm pretty sure it must, because things like GDPR have notification requirements. But I'm not sure Apple will. I won't bother telling you how ethical or responsible this is, it's not. What concerns me right now is my own professional responsibility. Given the sheer number of affected users, the unbelievable figure of potential bad actors, the severity of the threats, and the ease of exploitation, I believe that publishing this full independent report is about the only thing to ensure the safety of impacted users. Apple has already proven it can disable the affected subsystem with a single click. That's how it makes AMS data appear as currently unavailable. That means Apple can stop the exposure instantly, at any time. But what Apple has also already proven is its willingness to engage in evasive communication, disregard the norms of collaboration, and conceal real issues behind quiet fixes and PR boilerplate. I say it's time for some corporate accountability. Apple has had at least 3 opportunities to handle this. When it designed the system in the first place, when it was asked about it in the support ticket, and when it got the actual vulnerability report. Maybe no one could imagine personal IDs would surface this way when the system was designed. And maybe support reps aren't trained in cybersec. And yeah, that's how Apple responded to the report. That was Apple's response to me, the research community, and most crucially, the impacted users. The public facade of a privacy champion seems to be worth more to Apple than the actual privacy of actual users. That is why, after 60 days of waiting for a proper reaction, I am now publishing this independent report. Let's wrap this up. This started as a healthy security research collaboration, but soon it turned into some sort of investigative journalism thing. See the blog post for any follow-ups and updates, and if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. I'm not sure this story is over, so I can't promise the return of hands-on engineering content just yet. But if you feel today's topic deserves the time and attention, you can let me know by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. This channel is fairly small, so if you could share this video, especially among developers, it would help more people learn about the potential threats. You can also support my work financially at the links below, because finding all the details and connecting the dots took me a lot of time and effort. With that said, I can only hope that Apple will reconsider its priorities going forward. User privacy and security are noble values, no doubt about that. But they should manifest in more than just fancy TV commercials. Incidents where user data is at risk serve as a litmus test for those declared values. And so far, I'm not impressed with the results. My name is Yakov, and you watch the Codebird. Until next time, make your data fly.